Hello everyone, this is Prabhat Varma with DB Best, and I want to be able to, in just about 10 minutes, cover some of the work that we're doing with a number of different customers around modernizing their environment and ultimately around optimizing their database environment. So just jump into this. Our overall value proposition to a number of customers is around looking at the applications that are in their life cycle, understanding that all applications have a life cycle. They have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end. And when it gets to the end of its life cycle, for whatever that asset is, whether it's hardware, whether it's a software application, an operating system, there is a need to modernize. And the drivers for that modernization oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes falls into two main categories, and that is cost reduction. So you modernize in order to reduce your cost, or you modernize to enable some net new capability. And often you do both of these, or some element of both of these. In the cost reduction arena, there are four core pillars that we work under. Many folks know us for our migration capabilities, given that we wrote the SQL Server Migration Assistant tool. But we're also heavily involved in these other categories, probably the largest of which is consolidation. And I'll share with you some information around consolidation and how that analysis is being used in order to drive cost reduction, as well as around virtualization and upgrade. So four core things that are driving cost reduction. And then in the area of net new capabilities, the process is, or the capabilities are enabled by everything from moving to Azure, or to move the application over, or to upgrade the broader platform. Now, the way that we go about doing this is that we start off with a process of understanding what your existing inventory looks like, or what your existing environment looks like. And we can do this through tools that are provided by Microsoft, like the map tool. You can do it through SCOM. You can do it through a manual process. It really doesn't matter how the data is collected, but we start off by understanding at a database and a server level what your environment overall looks like, and then based upon an analysis of that environment, we then make recommendations on what you need to upgrade, and that upgrade recommendation is often aligned with the product roadmaps for SQL Server and or competing database platforms like Oracle and so forth, or what to migrate, or what to consolidate and virtualize, or what to move to Azure. And each one of these activities has a value proposition in of itself, and what we do is to aggregate all of that in order to be able to build out a financial model that is able to articulate why one would want to do these activities and what the benefit is to the business. So with that, let me just jump inside a demo here. So this is an analysis that we did for a customer of ours just quite recently. And in this analysis, the customer wanted to be able to understand what was the maximum amount of utilization that they could have for their existing servers that are out there. And what we essentially did was that we did this initially on a small sample set of data. So there are about 10 servers that were provided, and there were about 100 million data points, as you can see here in column E, that were captured. And those data points looked at everything from processor time to disk I/O to number of transactions, to number of user connections, and so forth. And from that, what we were able to do was to map out what the CPU, as an example, utilization is for a particular server, and our ability to be able to do that analysis. In this particular case, you're seeing this running across the server 16A. We can move it over to 20A, for example, and get a very different profile on what the CPU utilization is. And we did the same thing for disk I/O, which is impacting impacting any type of bandwidth constraints on their disk infrastructure to find out if we're thrashing on disk. We take a look at things like overall capacity that SQL Server is having on the server versus all other activities that are having on the servers. We take a look at things like user connections. In this particular graph, we're taking each line here represents a server and the number of users that are on that server at any given time. And what we did is that we created a model, essentially a capacity model, that enables the customer to understand how much additional capacity they can have on their existing servers. So in this particular case, you're seeing here, for example, on server 12B, there are 10 servers. And assuming that this customer wants a maximum threshold of 80% CPU utilization, for this server workload, you can add 15 additional servers and still be at or below the 80% CPU threshold with 1400 IOPS that are happening to understand what the maximum threshold is for disk. This is completely configurable. So some customers, for example, may be more happy with the 70% threshold. So if I were to reduce that to 70%, you can see how this number here has automatically gone down from 15 to 12. And this is, again, based upon all of this detailed data that was provided. And here is the actual data set that came from the data gathering process, which we leveraged through MDW, which is standing for Management Data Warehouse. It's a feature that's available only in SQL 2012 in order to be able to understand what the utilization is for SQL servers. Now, the important thing to note in this type of analysis is that this information, as you've seen, is valuable to be able to understand a customer's existing additional capacity, but we were also able to leverage this analysis to understand what the customer's capacity would be for reducing the footprint of overall servers, thereby reducing the hardware cost and the associated licensing for that server. And what we found in that is that we went down from 10 servers to 7 servers. And so the value proposition to customers is very clearly understood. You can do more with less based upon the profile that you have, or you can take a look at what you have and understand what you can maximize that to before you're going to run into some issues on performance and so forth. So this is a sample of what we're doing with a lot of our consolidation workload, and we oftentimes combine that with information that we are getting from map runs. So this chart that you're seeing here is an output of a map tool engagement. As you can see, it consists of computer names and SQL Server editions and so forth. And then we create different profile views in order to help the customer understand what is the maximum value proposition for their SQL utilization. So you can see, for example, for this customer, they have, if I were to click on the SQL Server 2000, you can see that there's 8 cores of SQL Server 2000 that's running on this computer name, and it's running a desktop edition for these 8 cores. Now we all know that SQL Server 2000 was end-of-life support on April 9th. So unless they bought some fairly expensive custom support, this is likely running in an unsupported environment, and so it's rather advisable for them to, if this is running any mission-critical solutions, for them to move this to SQL Server 2012. Similarly is the case for SQL Server 2005, which will go end of life next year. So to be able to understand, for example, that they're running 39 cores on SQL 2005 Express. And if I were to click on this view here, we're seeing that they're running 12 cores on SQL Server Standard. Really helps customers understand what activities they need to perform in order to modernize their environment. And these are a multitude of different scenarios that we can create. This happens to be an upgrade view. This is what I refer to as a business intelligence view. Here you can see that there are 40 servers that are representing 194 cores, and here's the actual servers themselves. And so we know that this customer is a heavy consumer of BI. And this capability, which I'm showing all this analysis against, is of course PowerView, which is only available in SQL 2012. So it is likely that this customer is going to be a heavy consumer of the new features of SQL 2012. But we also know, based upon the SQL profile view, that they have very little SQL 2012. And as a matter of fact, you can see that they have no SQL 2012 at all deployed on a physical machine. If we were to look at this thing in a virtual view, you could see that there's a very minimal amount of SQL 2012 running in a virtualized environment. So because we know that they're heavy consumers of analytics based upon this SQL components view, that's again coming in from the map tool run, we're able to provide them this insight to help them make the best use of the licenses, of the SQL licenses they have. And this applies to other things like the hardware profile views. So in this particular case, you can take a look in here and see that they still are running 3 plus 2 plus 2, so 7 cores on Intel Pentium 4s, and they can certainly optimize that by moving this to a more recent hardware and likely consolidating this, which will save them money on both hardware and also licenses. So these are just 3 models that are part of a multitude of models that can really be optimized around helping customers understand from a licensing side, which is what this view is providing, but then also from an optimization side, which is what this view is providing, how they can maximize their SQL Server licenses. So everything that we've chatted about is really for on-prem. One of the core things that I also want to mention is that many customers want it, in order to be able to have greater adoption of Azure, really need to understand not just what the cost of moving to Azure is, but what the cost of maintaining their application in Azure is. And because Azure is a pay-as-you-go system, you pay for disk, you pay for CPU, you pay for network bandwidth, it's really important to understand those factors to allow customers to have the ability to budget for that. If you don't know what you're going to budget for, it's very difficult to make a business decision. The good news is that through the same analysis that we're leveraging through consolidation, we have all of that data. We have the CPU data, we have the disk I/O data, we have the number of users and other transactional data that's then used in order to optimize a customer's environment. So coming back to this presentation, what our goal here is really to be able to maximize your SQL environment, and in order to do that, what we would need to do is to review the database and application environment. And there's really 3 core deliverables that we can provide. The first is one around optimizing the server environment, and this is something that a lot of customers have a significant amount of interest in. The value proposition is very straightforward. The second is around optimizing the SQL licensing based upon what they have deployed, how that aligns with the Microsoft product roadmap, and what is the best path for that consumption. And then the third is being able to articulate all of this not through technical analysis but through a business case. So I hope this provides a brief background. I went over my allotted time of 10 minutes. But I hope this provides a brief background on what it is that we're doing with a number of customers and how this is providing value to them. Should you have any additional questions, please give me a call at 425-785-4099 on my cell, or through my Microsoft account or my DB Best account. Thank you so much. Look forward to working with you all. Take care. Bye-bye.